She drugged her war hero husband, put a gun to his head, and pulled the trigger. When the FBI agent read his secret journal in court, they immediately dropped all murder charges. Because what Sarah found in that journal wasn't love letters or war memories. It was a detailed hunting log, documenting how her decorated husband had stalked and murdered 23 innocent Americans for sport, and she was going to be victim number 24. The entire courtroom fell silent as FBI agent Knox opened the blood-stained leather journal and began reading aloud. March 15, 2019. First hunt on American soil. Target Jennifer Walsh, 23. Jogging trail near Colorado Springs. Clean kill, no witnesses. The skills from Afghanistan translate perfectly to hunting civilians. Sarah Mitchell sat in orange jumpsuit and handcuffs, facing the death penalty for executing her husband in cold blood. For 6 months, the media had crucified her as a jealous, psychotic military wife who murdered America's hero. But as Agent Knox continued reading from Staff Sergeant David Mitchell's personal journal, everything changed. April 2nd, Michael Santos, 45, camping alone. Use sniper training for long-distance kill. No different from insurgents except no one shoots back. The prosecutor's face went white. Defense attorneys frantically took notes, and in the gallery, journalists realized they were witnessing the most shocking courtroom revelation in modern history. February 28, 2020. Sarah asking too many questions about my hunting trips. May need to add her to the list soon. Would be unfortunate but operationally necessary. The decorated war hero wasn't the victim. He was a serial killer who had been planning to murder his own wife, and she had discovered his secret just in time to save her own life. Welcome to Still Human. Here, we reveal the stories that shatter everything you thought you knew about heroes, villains, and the impossible choices people make when the system fails them completely. Before we dive into Sarah's story, drop your city in the comments below. This case will make you question everything about justice, survival, and what you would do if you discovered the person sleeping next to you was planning your murder. The woman the media called a cold-blooded killer had actually stopped one of the most prolific serial killers in American history, but the price she paid for protecting innocent lives would haunt her forever. Sarah Mitchell had been living a lie for 8 years, though she didn't know it yet. While she organized bake sales and supported other military families at Fort Carson, her husband David was perfecting skills that had nothing to do with serving his country. The first crack in their perfect facade appeared 6 months after David's return from Afghanistan. Sarah found blood on his hunting clothes, too much blood for any animal she could imagine. "What did you hunt this weekend?" she asked, holding up. David's eyes went cold. "Big game," he said, then walked away. That night, Sarah lay awake staring at the ceiling. Something fundamental had changed in the man she married. The David who left for deployment 3 years earlier wouldn't hurt a fly. This David seemed to enjoy violence in ways that made her skin crawl. But Sarah pushed down her fears. Thousands of military wives dealt with husbands who came home different. PTSD was common. Violence was part of war. She could handle this. What Sarah couldn't handle was the truth about what David was really hunting in those Colorado mountains. David's weekend trips became more frequent and more secretive. He'd leave Friday night and return Sunday evening with dirt under his fingernails and a satisfaction in his eyes that terrified Sarah. "How was therapy?" she'd ask, maintaining the fiction that these trips were about healing. "Productive," David would reply, then disappear into his locked study for hours. Sarah began noticing other changes. David installed military-grade locks throughout their house. He moved his gear to an off-base storage unit. Most disturbing, he started treating Sarah like a potential threat, monitoring her phone calls, questioning her whereabouts, isolating her from friends. The breaking point came when Sarah found a collection of driver's licenses hidden in David's truck. None of them belonged to him. All showed young faces, people who looked like they'd never hurt anyone. "Why do you have these?" Sarah confronted him. David stared at her for a long moment. "Trophies," he said simply. That word, trophies, made Sarah's blood freeze. Because hunters took trophies from their kills, and David wasn't hunting animals. While David was away on another therapeutic weekend, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She broke into his locked study. Inside, she found a room that looked like a military command center. Maps covered every wall, marked with red pins across 3 states. A large footlocker sat in the corner, secured with a lock that Sarah recognized from David's deployment gear. Using bolt cutters from their garage, Sarah opened that footlocker. What she found inside made her vomit on her own living room floor. Jewelry, wallets, credit cards, cell phones, and photographs, dozens of them showing people who looked happy, alive, unaware they were being watched by a predator. But the worst discovery was the journal, leather-bound, filled with David's precise military handwriting, documenting what he called his post-deployment operations. Entry after entry described the systematic stalking and killing of innocent Americans. David wrote about his victims like a scientist documenting experiments. He detailed their routines, their vulnerabilities, their final moments. And at the bottom of the most recent page, Sarah's hands shook as she read David's notes about her. He'd been studying her just like his other victims. He knew her jogging route, her work schedule, her habit of staying late at the office on Thursdays. Target shows increasing suspicion about operational activities, David had written. Termination may be required to maintain security. In that moment, Sarah understood 3 things. David was a serial killer. She was his next victim, and no one would believe her if she tried to report him. David was a decorated war hero with commendations from superior officers. Sarah was just a military wife with no evidence that would stand up in court. The journal was obtained illegally. The trophies could be explained away. But Sarah had one advantage David didn't know about. She'd been a military wife long enough to understand operational planning. If David could hunt people, Sarah could hunt David. She began her own surveillance operation, documenting David's patterns and preparing for the most important mission of her life. Because if she failed, she wouldn't just die. More innocent people would follow. On April 10, 2020, Sarah implemented her plan with military precision. She prepared David's favorite dinner and opened a bottle of wine. The same routine they'd shared hundreds of times during their marriage. But this time, Sarah had crushed 30 sleeping pills into David's glass. As her husband ate and drank, Sarah made small talk about her day, her voice steady despite her racing heart. David had no idea he was consuming enough sedatives to drop a horse. 20 minutes later, David collapsed on their living room floor. Sarah retrieved his service pistol from their bedroom safe, the same weapon he'd taught her to use for home protection. With David unconscious and helpless, Sarah placed the barrel against his temple. "This is for Jennifer Walsh," she whispered, thinking of the first name in his journal, "and Michael Santos, and all the others you murdered." Sarah pulled the trigger. Then she doused their house with gasoline and lit a match, ensuring that David's hidden trophies would burn with him. As flames consumed 8 years of marriage and lies, Sarah sat in her car across the street and called 911. "My husband is dead," she told the dispatcher. "I killed him." The media painted Sarah as a monster. Military wife executors war hero husband. Afghanistan veteran murdered by jealous spouse. Decorated soldier dies in domestic violence tragedy. David's military record was highlighted in every story. Bronze stars for valor, commendations for saving fellow soldiers, testimonials from commanding officers who called him a true American hero. This was not self-defense, the prosecutor told the jury. This was a calculated assassination of a man who served his country with honor. Sarah's court-appointed attorney was overwhelmed and underprepared. The evidence against her was devastating: premeditation, clear motive, and her own confession. No one searched the burned house for David's trophies. No one investigated the missing persons reports from his hunting areas. For 3 weeks, Sarah sat silently, as witness after witness described her as a cold-blooded killer. She never testified in her own defense. She never explained why she'd burned down their home. Then, on the final day of trial, FBI agent Jennifer Knox requested permission to present new evidence to the court. Agent Knox had been investigating missing persons cases across Colorado, the same disappearances that local police had dismissed as unrelated accidents. When she learned about Sarah's trial, she requested access to any evidence recovered from the house fire. Most materials had been destroyed, but investigators had found David's journal in a fireproof filing cabinet. What Agent Knox read in that journal changed everything. "Your Honor," she testified, "David Mitchell was not a victim of domestic violence. He was a serial killer, responsible for at least 23 confirmed murders." The courtroom erupted as Agent Knox read excerpts from David's hunting log. Each entry detailed the systematic stalking and killing of innocent civilians using military training and equipment. The defendant didn't murder her husband in a jealous rage. Agent Knox continued. She discovered that he was planning to kill her and took action to stop a predator that the system had failed to identify. The prosecution's case collapsed in real time. Military officials in the gallery looked sick as Agent Knox revealed that David's commanding officers had covered up his psychological instability during deployment. Within hours, all charges against Sarah were dropped. The woman who'd been facing the death penalty was suddenly free. But Sarah's vindication came with a terrible cost. The media attention following Sarah's release was overwhelming. Some called her a hero who'd stopped a serial killer. Others questioned whether she had the right to take justice into her own hands. Sarah gave only one interview. "I didn't kill my husband because I wanted to. I killed him because I had to. The system failed to protect his victims, and it would have failed to protect me." Agent Knox's investigation eventually identified 31 of David's victims, providing closure for families who'd spent years wondering what happened to their missing loved ones. The trophies found in David's storage unit confirmed his guilt beyond any doubt. The military faced congressional hearings about their handling of psychologically unstable veterans. New protocols were implemented, but critics argued the changes came too late for David's victims. For Sarah, freedom meant something different than vindication. She'd been proven right about her husband, but she would forever be known as the woman who'd executed him in cold blood. The trauma of living with a serial killer, discovering his crimes, and making the decision to end his life had changed her in ways that could never be healed. Today, Sarah Mitchell lives quietly under an assumed name, working as a victim's advocate in a small mountain town. She never remarried and rarely speaks about her experience. The David Mitchell case led to significant reforms in military discharge procedures and veteran mental health monitoring. Sarah's story became a case study in how ordinary people can be forced to make impossible choices when institutions fail. But questions remain about justice, vigilantism, and the price of survival. Sarah's supporters argue she did what the system couldn't: protect innocent lives from a predator that society had enabled. Critics contend that taking the law into her own hands set a dangerous precedent. regardless of the circumstances. Sarah herself offers no philosophical justification for her actions. When asked if she regrets killing David, her answer is simple. I regret that it was necessary. I don't regret that I did it. The truth is both simpler and more complex than the media portrayed. Sarah Mitchell wasn't a hero or a villain. She was a woman who discovered that the man she loved was a monster, and she made the only choice that would keep him from killing again. Sometimes protecting innocent lives requires impossible decisions. Sometimes justice comes at a price that never stops being paid. And sometimes the person sleeping next to you is planning your murder. If this story affected you, there are 3 things I want you to do right now. First, hit that subscribe button. Sarah's story is just one of thousands of cases where ordinary people are forced to make extraordinary choices. We share these stories because they matter, because they reveal truths about human nature that comfortable people prefer to ignore. Second, drop a comment telling us what you would have done in Sarah's situation. Would you have gone to the police, knowing they probably wouldn't believe you? Would you have tried to run, knowing a trained killer was hunting you? Or would you have done exactly what Sarah did? And finally, share this story, not because it's entertaining, but because it's important. Because somewhere right now, someone might be living with their own version of David Mitchell. Someone might need to know that when the system fails, survival sometimes requires impossible choices. We're still human, and we believe that even the darkest stories deserve to be told. Because sometimes, the only way to prevent evil is to recognize it when it's hiding in plain sight. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. And remember, the most dangerous predators are often the ones we're taught to trust the most. Stay vigilant. Stay human.